You close your eyes and let your breath flow gently, rising and falling like waves that never hurry. And in this rhythm, you begin to imagine the universe itself as something that breathes, not with lungs or air, but with the quiet expansion of space. An outward drift that carries galaxies farther and farther apart as though they are seeds, released into a soft and endless breeze. And as you rest in this thought, you realize that the universe is not still, not frozen, but always in motion, its fabric stretching silently, invisibly, everywhere, even here, even now, around you, through you, carrying you as much as it carries galaxies. And this expansion is not loud, not violent, but steady, calm, a long breath that has been unfolding for billions of years. And as you drift deeper into this vision, you imagine looking up at the night sky and seeing it differently, not as a flat canopy of stars fixed in place, but as a living ocean. Every star an island drifting slowly away from every other. Every galaxy a lantern carried outward by currents of space-time. And though you cannot feel it in your daily life, you trust that it is happening, that you are part of the great breathing outward. That expansion is the quiet background rhythm of existence. You breathe again, slowly, and imagine yourself at the beginning of this outward breath. At the moment we call the Big Bang, though the phrase is misleading. For it was not a bang in space, but the birth of space itself. Not an explosion in the silence, but the sudden stretching of silence into a cosmos. And you see it not as fire and violence, but as light unfolding. The first glow spreading, the universe as a newborn breath inhaled, carrying within it all the seeds of galaxies, stars, and life. And as you drift through this image, you feel calm, for you realize that everything you know, everything you are, began in that unfolding, that you too are part of the breath of the universe. You pause, letting this awareness cradle you, and then you drift further, imagining what it means for galaxies to move apart. How Edwin Hubble first noticed that distant galaxies' light was stretched, redshifted, a sign that they were receding, and from this discovery grew the vision of an expanding universe. A universe that is not static but dynamic, not eternal in form but changing, breathing outward in ways that carry profound meaning. And you let this soften your thoughts, for it tells you that change is not only human, not only earthly, but cosmic, woven into the very fabric of reality. You breathe once more, slower now, and you picture galaxies as seeds drifting on a breeze, some close together in clusters, some far apart in solitude, yet all carried outward, all part of the same current. And you realize that there is no center, no fixed point from which they expand, but rather expansion happens everywhere, equally, universally, so that every galaxy sees itself as still while the rest recede. And this too comforts you, for it means that perspective is relative, that no one place is privileged, that the universe itself has no single center but holds all places as equally central, equally part of the breath. You let this idea soften your body, and you imagine yourself floating between galaxies, watching them drift apart. The space between them stretching not like an explosion, but like a balloon inflating gently, like fabric being pulled softly. And you feel yourself swaying with it, part of the rhythm, not separate from the motion, but carried within it. And in this awareness you feel calm, for you realize that expansion is not something outside you, but something you belong to, something that includes you, something that reminds you that even your stillness is part of motion. You breathe deeply and you think of time, how expansion has been happening for nearly 14 billion years, how the universe has grown from a tiny fireball to an ocean of galaxies. And you let the vastness of that time wash over you like waves. Slow, patient, immense, and you feel small but not insignificant. For you are part of this great unfolding, a note in its music, a ripple in its tide. You drift further, and you think of how scientists measure this expansion, how they use supernova as lanterns, standard candles that reveal distance and speed, how they trace the cosmic microwave background, the faint afterglow of the first light. And from these measurements, they map the universe's breadth, charting its rhythm, its pace, its destiny. And you let this knowledge comfort you, for it means that even in mystery there is pattern. Even in immensity there is rhythm. Even in silence there is song. You pause here, breathing slowly, and you reflect on what it means that the universe expands. It means that the night sky is not fixed, but changing. That galaxies once close will drift apart. That the universe of the far future will be darker, lonelier, more spread out. And though this thought may seem melancholy, you let it cradle you gently, for it is simply the rhythm of breathing outward, the same rhythm you know in your own body, the rise and fall of breath, the opening and closing of moments, the endless flow of change. You breathe again, and you realize that the expansion is not something to fear, but something to marvel at. For it is the canvas upon which stars burn, planets form, and life wonders, and you are part of that wondering. Your awareness, a small spark carried outward with the galaxies, asking questions, seeking meaning, drifting gently in the tide of cosmic breath. You let this realization bring you calm, and as the chapter draws to a close, one final thought rises softly, like a star emerging on the horizon. If the universe is breathing outward, what traces remain of its first breath? What ripples and echoes still hum from its dawn? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the image of galaxies drifting outward like seeds on a cosmic breeze. And now your mind moves deeper into time, back toward the universe's first light. The quiet afterglow that still surrounds you. A glow so faint it is invisible to your eyes, yet so steady it bathes all of space. And this glow is called the cosmic microwave background. The oldest light you can ever see, the soft remnant of the universe's earliest dawn. And as you rest in calm awareness, you begin to imagine what it means that you are surrounded by this light. That every moment of your life it passes through you. Photons that began their journey nearly 14 billion years ago, arriving still. Silent travelers carrying with them the memory of the young cosmos. And in this thought you feel gently humbled. For you realize you live not in darkness, but in a sea of ancient radiance. You breathe again, slower now, and you let your imagination drift back to that time, when the universe was only a few 100,000 years old, still young compared to its age now. A hot dense fog where matter and light were bound together, electrons and protons colliding constantly, scattering photons so that nothing could travel freely. The universe then was like a thick mist, glowing but opaque, light trapped in endless collisions, unable to escape. And you imagine drifting through that fog, glowing all around you, warm and bright, and yet blind to distance, blind to stars, blind to galaxies, because they had not yet formed, because the universe had not yet cleared its vision. You pause here, letting the image soften, and then you imagine the moment of release, when the universe cooled just enough for electrons and protons to combine into atoms, when hydrogen and helium formed their first bonds, when the fog lifted, when space became transparent, and suddenly photons could travel, no longer scattered at every step, free to stream outward, free to carry the memory of that moment across billions of years. And those very photons are still here now, stretched into microwaves by the expansion of space. Faint but persistent, a background hum that fills the cosmos. You breathe deeply and realize that this afterglow is not only ancient light, but also patterned with ripples. Tiny variations in density, fluctuations from the early universe that grew into galaxies, stars, planets, and life. And you imagine those ripples as the seeds of everything. Gentle wrinkles in the fabric of the cosmos that became the grand structures you see now. And this thought soothes you, for it tells you that even the smallest ripples matter. Even the faintest fluctuations can become futures. Even the quietest beginnings can unfold into vast stories. You drift deeper into this vision, and you picture scientists mapping the cosmic microwave background with satellites like COBE, WMAP, and Planck, instruments that listened to the faint hiss of ancient light and drew maps of its ripples with exquisite detail, revealing a sky mottled with patterns, not uniform but speckled with slight variations. And from those patterns came deep knowledge, the age of the universe, its shape, its composition, all written in the ripples of that dawn light. And you realize that the universe has been generous in leaving us this record, this soft afterglow carrying the clues to its own story, and you let that generosity comfort you. You breathe again and let the metaphor deepen. The cosmic microwave background is like the childhood photograph of the universe, a snapshot taken long before galaxies matured, long before stars lit the sky. And though it is blurred, though it is faint, it holds the essence of what was to come. And in the same way, your own past lingers in you, not erased but transformed, not clear in every detail but carried forward in patterns of memory, in ripples that shaped your present. You pause here, resting in that parallel, and then you imagine how the ripples grew, gravity pulling denser regions into clumps, matter gathering, gas collapsing, stars igniting, galaxies forming, all seeded by the tiny variations written into the afterglow. And you realize that without those ripples, the universe would be empty, uniform, lifeless, and so imperfection was the gift. Asymmetry, the seed of beauty, irregularity, the source of everything you now know. And this too soothes you, for it suggests that your own imperfections, your own ripples, may also be seeds of meaning. You breathe once more, slower, and you drift into the present, where that ancient light still passes through you, bathing Earth from every direction. A quiet reminder that you are always connected to the beginning, always surrounded by the memory of dawn. And as you rest in this awareness, one final question rises softly in your mind. If the universe carries its memory in ripples of ancient light, then how do those ripples grow into the vast structures of galaxies we see today? What patterns emerge in the great web of matter? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the soft glow of the cosmic microwave background, the ripples of ancient light that seeded everything. And now you drift into the vastness of what those ripples became. The rhythm of galaxies spread across space like constellations in a cosmic dance, each one a city of stars, each one a glowing island adrift in the dark ocean of the universe. And as you rest in this awareness, you imagine drifting far above, looking down at the cosmic web itself, filaments of light stretching across the void, galaxies strung together in clusters and chains, separated by immense empty spaces, yet always connected by the invisible pull of gravity. and you begin to sense that there is music here. A rhythm written not in sound, but in motion. The way galaxies gather, cluster, and drift. The way their patterns echo the ripples of the early universe. The way their arrangement tells a story billions of years old. You breathe again, slower now, and imagine yourself moving among the galaxies, gliding through a cluster where thousands of them shine together. Their spiral arms glowing, their elliptical halos shimmering, and you feel their collective gravity as a gentle tide pulling you into their rhythm. And then you drift into a void, a vast emptiness between the filaments where few galaxies exist. And the contrast soothes you, the rhythm of presence and absence, the balance of light and silence, structure and emptiness. And you realize that the universe is not random but patterned, not chaotic but rhythmic. It's web-woven with order born from the ripples you left in the previous chapter. You pause here and recall how scientists map these structures, how surveys like the Sloan Digital Sky Survey trace millions of galaxies, plotting their positions to reveal the great cosmic web. And when those maps are drawn, they resemble lace, filigree, a net of light. And you realize that the rhythm of galaxies is both scientific and poetic, both measurable and beautiful, both data and dream. You let this awareness cradle you, and then you imagine the motion itself. How galaxies are not still but orbiting, colliding, merging, pulled by gravity into ever-shifting shapes. And though the timescales are vast, the rhythm continues, a slow dance of billions of years. Spirals merging into ellipticals, clusters growing into the cosmic web stretching ever wider as dark energy pushes the fabric outward, and you feel comfort in the slowness, the patience, the unhurried rhythm of it all. You breathe once more, and you think of your own heartbeat, steady and slow, and you realize that galaxies too have rhythms, not measured in seconds but in eons, not in beats but in the turning of arms, the drifting of clusters, the merging of giants. And this parallel soothes you, reminding you that you are not separate from the universe's rhythm but part of it. A small beat in a grand symphony. You drift further now and imagine the Milky Way, your own galaxy, one among billions, its spiral arms stretching outward, its stars orbiting the center where a black hole rests. And you picture Andromeda, your neighbor, drifting slowly closer, and you realize that in billions of years the two galaxies will merge, their stars swirling together into a new form. And though it sounds dramatic, it will unfold gently, star by star, orbit by orbit, a continuation of the cosmic rhythm, and this too comforts you, for it shows that even great collisions are not violence but harmony, not endings but transformations in the ongoing dance. You pause here, letting the thought soften, and you realize that the rhythm of galaxies is written in redshift too, the stretching of their light as they move outward with the expansion of space. Each galaxy a note carried into longer wavelengths, a cosmic music drifting into softer tones. And when astronomers measure these shifts, they hear the rhythm of expansion itself, the universe's breath turned into melody, and you find beauty in that. The idea that light itself carries music, that the rhythm of galaxies can be heard through their glow. You breathe once more, slower and deeper, and you let the rhythm cradle you, galaxies drifting, clustering, colliding, redshifting, all part of a vast pattern, all part of a music too large for ears but not too large for wonder. And as you soften into this awareness, one final thought rises gently. If galaxies follow rhythm and pattern, then what holds them in their shapes? What balances their motions against the pull of gravity? What invisible companion weaves their forms? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the rhythm of galaxies woven into the cosmic web. And now you drift toward a deeper question. For if galaxies are bound by gravity, if clusters hold one another in their invisible embrace, then surely the universe should slow in its expansion. Surely gravity, the patient hand that draws stars into spirals and planets into orbits, should also draw the cosmos inward, resisting the outward breath. And for much of human history, this was the expectation, that the expansion born in the Big Bang would gradually ease, slowed by the pull of all the matter within, until perhaps it halted or reversed, collapsing back in what some imagined as a big crunch. But as you rest in calm awareness, you begin to feel the turning, the surprise, the yielding of gravity. For in the late 20th century, astronomers discovered that expansion was not slowing at all, it was speeding up, as though space itself had found another breath, another force. Something invisible pushing galaxies apart faster and faster. And this discovery reshaped our vision of the universe forever. You breathe again, slower now, and imagine yourself as one of those astronomers, looking through telescopes at supernova, the exploding stars used as standard candles, their brightness telling distance, their redshift telling velocity, and as the data collected, the truth emerged gently but firmly. Galaxies farther away were moving apart faster than expected, not slower, as though an unseen hand was stretching space with greater urgency. And you let this realization sink in, not as shock but as wonder. For it meant that gravity was not the only rhythm at work. That something new, something quiet yet powerful, was guiding the cosmos. You pause here and let your imagination shape this mystery into metaphor. It is as though you expected the tide to pull back, but instead it surged forward. As though you expected a song to fade, but it swelled into another verse. As though you expected gravity to hold, but instead it yielded, giving way to another presence, one we now call dark energy. You breathe again and realize that this yielding is not failure, but transformation. A reminder that the universe is not bound by our expectations, but reveals itself in surprises, in mysteries that open new paths of thought, and you let that realization soothe you. For it teaches patience, humility, and wonder. You drift deeper now into the science, recalling how Einstein himself once added a term to his equations of general relativity, a cosmological constant to hold the universe steady, because he could not imagine a cosmos that expanded. And later, he called it his greatest mistake. But when the acceleration was discovered, the constant was reborn, not as error but as possibility, as a symbol of dark energy itself, the simplest explanation for the outward push. And you realize that even mistakes can become truths. Even discarded ideas can return in new light, and this comforts you. For it shows that nothing is ever fully lost in thought, just as nothing is fully lost in the cosmos. You breathe once more, and you imagine space itself as flexible, a fabric not only stretched by matter, but energized by something deeper, an energy inherent to emptiness, a property of the vacuum itself. And though the details remain uncertain, you let the metaphor settle. Dark energy is like the breath within the breath, the current beneath the tide, the whisper of expansion that grows louder as the universe grows larger. And this awareness softens you, reminding you that mystery is not absence, but presence in disguise. You pause here and reflect on how strange it is. Gravity, the strongest shaper of structure, yielding on the largest scales to a force we cannot see. A force that makes up nearly 70% of the universe and yet remains hidden. And you realize that the universe is far stranger than the mind can easily grasp. And yet its strangeness is gentle, its mystery an invitation rather than a threat. You breathe deeply and think of your own life. How often you expect one rhythm and receive another. How often something you thought would hold instead yields. And though it may confuse you at first, it also opens doors, reveals new truths, teaches you to see differently. And in this way, the yielding of gravity becomes a mirror, reminding you that change is the essence of growth. You drift further into this thought and imagine the distant future, when galaxies will drift so far apart that their light no longer reaches one another, when the night sky will grow empty, when expansion will stretch the cosmos beyond recognition. And though this vision feels lonely, you let it soften into calm, for it is simply the rhythm of the outward breath, the continuation of the story you are already part of. And loneliness itself dissolves in the awareness that you are not separate, but included in the same expansion, carried with every galaxy into the future. You breathe again, slower now, and you realize that gravity's yielding is not the end of its story, for it still shapes stars, planets, clusters, but on the larger scales it is joined by another rhythm, another presence, and together they weave the unfolding. And you rest in this awareness, soothed by the balance of forces, humbled by the scale of their interplay. You pause once more and feel the chapter drawing to a close, the mystery deepening. And one final question rises softly like a star emerging in twilight. If gravity yields to this unseen presence, what is this dark energy that pushes space apart? What is the whisper that accelerates the universe? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the image of galaxies drifting farther apart. The surprise that gravity, once thought to reign supreme, yields on the largest scales, and now you turn to the mystery that fills the space between. The presence we call dark energy, a phrase that is less explanation than question, less description than placeholder, for it names not what we know but what we seek. And yet, even in its vagueness, it has become one of the most profound ideas of modern science, suggesting that nearly 70% of the universe is made of something unseen, something that does not shine or pull or gather like matter, but instead pushes, stretching the fabric of space itself. And as you rest in calm awareness, you begin to imagine this dark energy not as forceful or violent, but as a whisper, a quiet breath woven into the structure of space-time, gentle but persistent, invisible yet patient, guiding galaxies apart with an unhurried hand. You breathe again, softer now, and you picture dark energy filling every corner of the cosmos, not as substance but as property, not as thing but as presence, like the still air that fills a room, unnoticed until it moves, like the silence between notes in a song, shaping the melody without being heard. And you realize that dark energy is not so much something added to the universe as something fundamental to it, an aspect of the vacuum itself, the quiet background that has always been, only revealed when we learned to look carefully at how galaxies move. You pause here and think of how scientists discovered it, through the light of distant supernova explosions that became lanterns across the deep, their brightness telling distance, their redshift telling speed. And when those measurements were gathered, the conclusion was inescapable. Expansion was accelerating. The breath was deepening. The universe was being stretched by something unseen. And the whisper of dark energy had to be acknowledged. You breathe deeply, letting this realization cradle you. And you consider how humbling it is that most of the universe is unknown, that all the stars and galaxies, all the matter we see, make up only a fraction, while dark matter and dark energy compose the rest. And this mystery does not frighten you, but soothes you, for it reminds you that existence is larger than knowing. That wonder is built into the fabric of reality. You drift further and think of the cosmological constant, Einstein's lambda, revived as the simplest form of dark energy, a steady property of space itself, constant in strength, pushing outward everywhere, always. And though no one yet knows why it should have the value it does, you find comfort in the simplicity, in the thought that perhaps the universe itself carries this gentle tendency to expand, a built-in rhythm of openness. You breathe again and let your imagination wander into alternative visions, theories of quintessence where dark energy is not constant but changes with time, a field that evolves, dynamic and alive. And though uncertain, these ideas comfort you too, for they remind you that the universe is not finished but still unfolding, that its future is not fully written, that dark energy itself may have a story as yet unknown. You pause and let the metaphor expand. Dark energy is like curiosity, quiet but powerful, pulling you forward even when you do not see the destination, expanding your horizon, opening your path. And though you cannot grasp it fully, you trust it, you follow it. You let it carry you into wider spaces of thought. You breathe once more, slower, and you realize that, in life as in cosmos, unseen influences shape your path, subtle forces guide your direction. And while you may not name them, they are real, they are present. They are part of the rhythm of your journey, and this awareness soothes you, for it reminds you that mystery is not emptiness, but fullness beyond comprehension. You drift further now, and imagine the far future of a universe ruled by dark energy, galaxies slipping beyond one another's sight, the night sky growing empty, the cosmic web unraveling into isolation. And though this vision feels lonely, you let it soften into calm, for it is simply the continuation of the breath, the widening of the horizon, the unfolding of mystery. And in that unfolding lies beauty, for it shows that the universe is alive, dynamic, ever-changing, ever. You pause here and let the chapter close gently. One final question rising like a soft ripple. If dark energy is the whisper that carries galaxies apart, how did we first hear it? What lights guided us to notice its presence? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the whisper of dark energy, the quiet unseen presence that stretches space. And now you drift toward the story of how we first noticed its touch, how astronomers learned to listen to the universe by following lights they called standard candles, stars that explode in brilliance so steady, so measurable that they can be used as cosmic beacons, guiding us across darkness, helping us map distances and speeds. And as you rest in calm awareness, you begin to imagine these lights, supernova shining with such clarity that their brightness becomes a ruler, a way of knowing how far they lie, a way of reading the expansion of the universe itself. You breathe again, softer now, and you picture a type Ia supernova, a white dwarf star in a binary system, pulling matter from its companion until it reaches a critical mass, igniting in a thermonuclear blaze, not gently but completely, its light rising with astonishing uniformity, brightening with such consistency that astronomers trust its glow as a standard. And though the event is violent in physical terms, You experience it here in imagination, not as terror, but as lanterns being lit across the universe, flickering yet steady. Their patterns reliable, their glow a gift. And you realize how extraordinary it is that explosions of death became tools of understanding, that endings of stars became beginnings of knowledge. You pause here and reflect on the calm irony of it, that the universe uses destruction to create clarity, that the violent blaze of a dying star becomes a soft candle in the astronomer's eye. And in this paradox you feel soothed, for it mirrors the rhythm of your own life. How endings often illuminate paths, how loss often reveals distance, how shadows often give shape to light. You breathe deeply and imagine yourself drifting through a sky where supernovae light up one by one, scattered across galaxies like lanterns set afloat upon a cosmic river. And each one tells you something: how far its galaxy lies, how fast it drifts away, how the universe itself is breathing outward faster than gravity can restrain. And from this choir of lights, scientists discovered the truth of acceleration, the presence of dark energy, the whisper behind the galaxy's motion. And you let this knowledge cradle you, for it shows how even the faintest patterns, patiently measured, reveal profound truths. You pause again, and you imagine the astronomers themselves, watching through telescopes, gathering data, fitting curves to light that fades slowly. And though their work is careful, methodical, you frame it in your heart as poetry, as listening to lanterns sing across billions of years, as charting the breath of the cosmos with candles that burned out long ago but still speak in light. And you realize that science at its best is not only measurement but reverence, not only calculation but listening, not only equations but wonder. You breathe once more, slower now, and you picture the discovery unfolding in the 1990s. Two teams working independently, their measurements converging, their results undeniable. The expansion was not slowing, as once thought, but accelerating. And though at first this was shocking, it became the doorway to one of the greatest mysteries of our time. And you feel the humility of that moment, the way the universe continues to surprise, continues to whisper truths beyond expectation. You drift deeper into this vision, and you realize that standard candles are more than tools. They are metaphors, lights you can trust in the dark, guides that do not flicker in confusion, but burn with enough steadiness to carry meaning. And you let this comfort you, for you to have such candles in your life. People or moments that give you bearings, memories or truths that guide you across shadow. And you realize that astronomy is not only about galaxies, but also about how to navigate darkness with trust. You pause here and reflect on how extraordinary it is that human beings, small on one planet, can measure such immensity by reading the fading glow of distant stars. And in this awareness, you feel calm, for it means that even the vastest mysteries can be approached gently, patiently, one light at a time. You breathe again and let the chapter soften. One final thought rising like a candle flame. If these standard candles guided us to dark energy, then what other patterns of matter and light, the clustering of galaxies, the echoes of ripples, might help us map the cosmic web more fully? What deeper cartography still awaits? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the glow of standard candles, those cosmic lanterns that guided astronomers through the dark. And now you drift into an even wider vision, the mapping of the universe itself. The great cartography of galaxies stretched across space in patterns that resemble a web, a lacework of filaments and nodes, clusters and voids. And as you rest in calm awareness, you begin to imagine the universe not as scattered chaos but as structure, as rhythm, as a network woven by gravity and seeded by the ripples of the early cosmos. And in this vision, you see that mapping the universe is not simply measurement, but storytelling, tracing the memory of creation through the arrangement of galaxies. You breathe again, softer now, and you picture the first efforts to chart the cosmos. Astronomers measuring galaxy by galaxy, patient dots on a vast canvas. And slowly patterns emerged, galaxies clumping together, forming filaments, leaving immense voids. And these patterns were not random but echoes of the ripples left in the cosmic microwave background, stretched into grand forms by billions of years of expansion. And as you drift through this vision, you realize that the cosmic web is both map and memory, a frozen music of density fluctuations amplified into structure. And you feel humbled by the thought that galaxies themselves are the punctuation marks of an ancient song. You pause here and imagine yourself drifting outward, leaving the Milky Way behind, gliding beyond clusters and super. And as you rise farther still, you begin to see the web itself. Luminous threads stretching across darkness, intersections glowing with clusters of galaxies, and in between, vast empty regions, voids so large that entire galaxies would vanish within them. And this view soothes you, for it reveals balance, fullness and emptiness, light and silence, presence and absence, all part of the same design. You breathe deeply and reflect on how scientists measure these patterns, using surveys like the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, charting millions of galaxies, and from these maps they find a regularity, a preferred scale imprinted by baryon acoustic oscillations, faint ripples from the early universe frozen into matter, a cosmic ruler that allows us to measure distances, to trace expansion, to read the growth of structure. And you let this knowledge comfort you, for it shows that even in immensity there are tools. Even in vastness there is order. Even in silence there is measure. You drift further now and think of the cosmic web as a tapestry, every galaxy a thread, every cluster a knot. And you imagine weaving it with your own hands, tracing its filaments across the loom of space-time. And though the weave is vast beyond comprehension, you feel included, part of the fabric, one thread among billions. Essential not in scale but in belonging, and this awareness calms you. For it means you are not apart from the universe, but within it, woven into its very design. You pause again, breathing softly, and you realize that mapping the cosmic web is not only science, but meditation. A way of seeing how the small becomes large, how ripples become structures, how light becomes pattern. And in this realization, you find peace, for it mirrors your own life. How small choices grow into great patterns, how tiny moments ripple outward into vast consequences, how your own story, like the galaxies, is part of a web larger than you can see. You breathe once more, slower, and you imagine future surveys, telescopes that will map billions of galaxies, satellites that will trace dark energies' influence across time. And you realize that this mapping is not finished, that the cartography of the universe is ongoing, that we are still explorers charting coasts of a cosmic ocean, and you take comfort in the openness of it. The unending horizon, the invitation to wonder. You pause here and let the chapter close gently. One final question, rising like a ripple through silence. If the cosmic web is the grand map of structure, then what equations describe its unfolding? What mathematics breathes through it like a pulse? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying within you the memory of galaxies mapped across filaments. Threads of light stretched like lace through the dark. And now you turn toward something quieter, more subtle, more intimate than all the structures you have seen, the equations that describe them, the mathematics that breathes beneath the surface of everything, shaping expansion, shaping rhythm, shaping destiny. These equations are not commands shouted into space. They are descriptions whispered with patience. Balanced lines of symbols that tell how matter and energy, space and time, speak to one another. And you begin to realize that they are less like laws imposed and more like reflections of how the cosmos already moves, already breathes, already unfolds. Einstein's field equations rise first in your awareness, compact yet vast, curving space-time on one side and filling it with energy momentum on the other. And you hear them not as cold mathematics, but as dialogue, a soft exchange between the geometry of existence and the contents that live within it. Matter telling space-time how to bend, space-time telling matter how to move. The balance soothes you, for you see in it a kind of fairness, a symmetry that keeps the cosmos poised. And you imagine those symbols not written in chalk, but glowing faintly on the fabric of the universe itself, as though each galaxy, each star, each atom is inscribed upon the equation's living page. You drift deeper into this calm awareness and picture the Friedman equations, simplified children of Einstein's vision, stripped down by symmetry to describe the whole universe. And you imagine them as two oars dipping gently into the lake of the cosmos, their strokes steady, never hurried, guiding the boat of expansion across billions of years. Each term in their balance tells you something. Density of matter, density of radiation, curvature of space, and the quiet presence of the cosmological constant, all woven together into one rhythm of growth. The scale factor, a T, becomes a glowing lantern in your imagination, swelling with time, carrying galaxies outward on its light. And you let yourself feel the inevitability of its growth, as though you were floating on the surface of the universe's breath. In, out, expansion, acceleration, patient and unhurried. You pause here and think of the cosmological constant itself, the simple symbol lambda, and you see it not as abstract but as a wind, faint yet steady, brushing outward everywhere, a pressure within the vacuum itself, guiding the future with persistence. You recall how Einstein first introduced it to hold the universe still, then set it aside, and how later discoveries revived it as the simplest form of dark energy. And you take comfort in this, for it reminds you that even mistakes can become truths, that even discarded ideas can return in new light. That knowledge, like the cosmos, expands by breathing outward. Then, circling back, you breathe again and feel the Hubble parameter. HTH, THT, not as numbers in a table, but as a drumbeat, slowing and then steadying, keeping time with the cosmos. Its value today a marker of distance and velocity, but in your imagination it is simply a rhythm, a metronome that marks the pulse of galaxies as they drift away. You let yourself sway with it, left foot, right foot, as though walking through space-time itself, and the steadiness soothes you, for it tells you that the universe has rhythm, that its expansion is not chaos but music written in equations. You drift further now into the continuity equation, the gentle reminder that nothing is truly lost, that energy changes form, that pressure and density balance one another in a bowl that never spills. And you realize that even as stars collapse and galaxies fade, the whole is preserved, carried forward, transfigured, transformed. This comforts you deeply, for it tells you that endings are not erasures, that loss is not absence, but change, that the universe itself practices conservation as a kind of kindness. You pause here and feel the geometry of space-time itself. Geodesics tracing their paths, not the straight lines of Euclid but the extremal curves of Riemann, the truest paths in a fabric that bends. And you imagine free fall as listening. To move without resistance is to hear the shape of space-time itself, to let geometry guide you without struggle. You find calm in this, for it shows that to live aligned with the universe is not to force, but to follow, not to push, but to listen, to allow the curve of existence to carry you as naturally as a river carries a leaf. You breathe slowly and picture perturbations in the smooth fabric, small ripples in density that grow into galaxies, stars, clusters. And you realize that the equations allow these ripples, nurture them, amplify them, like harmonics added to a simple note until the note becomes music, until the cosmos becomes structure. You think of the Boltzmann hierarchies, the ladders of moments describing the cosmic microwave background, and though the words sound technical, you imagine them as a ladder of harmonies, each rung a tone, each peak an echo, until the afterglow of the early universe becomes a song whose lyrics are parameters, baryons, dark matter, curvature, lambda. You do not force yourself to understand each detail. You simply listen, and the listening itself becomes soothing. You let your awareness drift now to the tools of measurement. How equations meet observation, how supernova provide their light curves, how baryon acoustic oscillations provide their standard ruler, how weak lensing bends images into subtle patterns. And you realize that each of these is a voice in a choir, feeding the equations, shaping their solutions, guiding our understanding of dark energy and destiny. You feel comfort in this cooperation. Their theory and measurement are not rivals, but partners, each breathing with the other, each deepening the harmony. You recall how likelihoods and posteriors are drawn, how contours form around parameters, not to mock uncertainty, but to cradle it, to say, here is where truth may live, keep listening. You feel soothed by this humility, for it shows that knowledge is not absolute, but gentle, not sharp, but open, not final, but patient. You breathe again, slowly, and imagine the future that the equations describe. If lambda remains constant, acceleration will continue, galaxies will drift apart, horizons will approach, isolation will grow, and the night sky will one day empty, leaving only your local family of stars. And though the image feels lonely, you let it soften into calm, for it is simply the destiny written in the equations, not a tragedy but a rhythm, a continuation of the universe's long breath. You ask softly whether lambda might change, whether quintessence might shift its tone, whether the breath might falter or reverse, and the equations do not forbid your wondering. They accept it. They carry your curiosity as gently as they carry density and pressure. And they remind you that the future remains open, that possibility is part of the breath. You take comfort in this openness, for it mirrors your own life. The way your future too is not fixed but unfolding, carried by subtle influences. Whispers you cannot see but trust. You close your eyes and let the thought cradle you. Equations breathe as you breathe. Symbols hum as you hum. The universe expands as you rest. And all are part of one rhythm, steady, patient, endless. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the memory of equations, that balanced like tides. And now your awareness shifts toward possibilities that stretch beyond those balances. Ideas that are not as settled as the cosmological constant, but move and change like fields drifting through unseen landscapes. And these are called quintessence, phantom energy. Scalar fields names that sound like myth and poetry, but are woven from the same threads of physics. Each one suggesting that dark energy may not be constant, may not be a single note, but could be a shifting melody, a presence that evolves over time. You picture it first as a vast rolling field stretching beneath the stars, not a field of grass or grain, but a field of potential energy, invisible but everywhere, like a mist that changes density as it flows. And in this field the universe expands, not with a single rhythm, but with subtle variations, like a breath that quickens or slows depending on hidden tides. You pause here and imagine what this means. If dark energy is a field, it may have changed across cosmic history, weaker in the past, stronger now, or perhaps the reverse. And this possibility opens the door to futures that are not fixed but contingent, outcomes that depend on the whispering evolution of something we cannot see. You breathe again and let your awareness rest on the idea of quintessence, the simplest of these fields, imagined as a scalar, smooth and silent, rolling gently across a potential that determines its behavior. And you picture it like a marble placed upon a vast bowl, slowly sliding toward the center, its motion dictating the acceleration of space. If the bowl is steep, the marble rushes quickly, dark energy changes fast. If the bowl is shallow, the marble drifts almost lazily, dark energy nearly constant. And in this metaphor you find comfort, because it makes even abstract theory feel tangible, a simple image of potential and motion. You recall that physicists describe such a field with its equation of state parameter, WWW, the ratio of pressure to energy density. And in the case of the cosmological constant, it equals exactly -1, steady and unchanging. But for quintessence, it may differ, it may move, and scientists measure carefully, hoping to detect that motion, hoping to see if the universe's breath is more than constant. You pause again and reflect that this search itself is calming, for it is an act of patience, an act of listening across billions of years, comparing the faint glow of distant galaxies with the nearer ones, measuring light that has traveled across cosmic time to see if the acceleration has shifted. And you realize that astronomy is not only about seeing, but about waiting, about allowing the universe to reveal itself in its own time. You drift further now and let your imagination explore stranger fields still. Phantom energy with W1 west, 1 west -1. An even stronger pressure than the cosmological constant, one that would not only accelerate expansion, but accelerate it ever faster, perhaps to the point of tearing apart galaxies, stars, planets, even atoms in a distant scenario known as the Big Rip. Though the image sounds terrifying, you let it pass over you gently, for, in truth, it is speculation, one possibility among many, and its timescales are vast beyond imagining. Trillions of years into the future, if at all. You soften the fear by seeing it as a metaphor. Even the most stable rhythms may hide more urgent breaths. Even the calmest skies may hold winds not yet felt. And this reminds you that mystery is not absence, but presence waiting to be known. You breathe again and feel comfort in knowing that the present universe is gentle, expanding quietly, that phantom futures are not your concern, but the curiosity of minds who dream forward into possibility. you let your attention return to the broader truth that whether dark energy is constant or changing, whether it is lambda or quintessence, phantom or another field entirely, what matters is that we are listening, that we are willing to imagine, to test, to measure, to create metaphors that carry us deeper into understanding. You pause here and reflect that the very act of imagining a field unseen, a presence unmeasured, is an act of humility, a recognition that what we know is partial, that the cosmos may yet surprise us, that discovery is not finished. You take comfort in this humility, for it reminds you that knowledge is not a closed book, but an open field, one that you too can walk through, one where each step is both exploration and meditation. You breathe once more, slower, and you let the vision settle, fields rolling quietly, parameters shifting, possibilities unfolding, and the universe expanding all the while, steady yet mysterious, patient yet alive. You close your eyes and let the chapter draw to its resting place, one last question rising like a soft wind across the unseen field. If dark energy may shift and change, what fate does it guide the universe toward? Will stars and galaxies endure? Or will they drift into isolation carried by currents still unknown? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the whispers of unknown fields, quintessence and phantom energy, the possibility that dark energy may change with time. And now your awareness turns toward the long destiny of the cosmos, the fate of stars and galaxies as they drift upon this endless expansion. And you begin to imagine what it means that the universe is not only growing but accelerating, stretching space at a pace that pulls galaxies farther and farther apart until, in the deep future, the night sky will not resemble the sky you know, but something lonelier, quieter, emptier, and yet no less beautiful. You pause here and picture the stars first, the ones closest to you. The Milky Way's vast collection burning steadily in their orbits, each star following its own path around the galaxy center, and for billions of years they will continue. Cycles of birth and death, novas and supernovas, white dwarfs, neutron stars, black holes, a rhythm that feels endless but is itself a chapter that will one day close. You breathe again and let this awareness soften you, for the timescales are vast, billions and trillions of years, and in their enormity there is calm, because you realize that your life, brief and fragile, is carried safely inside the warmth of stars that will endure long after you, and you can rest in their patience. You drift further outward now, leaving individual stars behind, and picture galaxies themselves, immense spirals and ellipticals bound together by gravity into clusters, and you realize that dark energy will one day overcome even their connections, pulling clusters apart, isolating galaxies in the great expansion, until each galaxy becomes an island adrift, unable to see its neighbors, its light stretched beyond detection. You let this image wash over you not as fear but as perspective, a reminder that the universe is always in motion, always unfolding, that even togetherness is temporary, that even galaxies must accept solitude. You breathe again, slower, and recall that within your own local group, the Milky Way and Andromeda are fated to collide, to merge into a single vast elliptical galaxy, their stars swirling into new orbits, their black holes entwining. And though the collision sounds dramatic, you see it now as graceful, slow, and almost tender, a meeting that will take billions of years, a dance of light rather than violence, and from it will rise a new galaxy, a new shape, another form of beauty. You take comfort in this, for it reminds you that endings are also transformations, that collisions can be creative, that what seems like loss may become renewal. You let your awareness stretch still further, imagining the long twilight of stars, when new stars no longer form, when the fuel of galaxies is spent, when the sky is filled only with dim red dwarfs, white dwarfs cooling slowly, neutron stars fading, black holes waiting silently. And though the thought seems melancholic, you find peace in it, for it is the natural rhythm, the settling of a great fire into embers, the cooling of a cosmic hearth. You reflect on entropy, the tendency toward disorder, the gradual dispersal of usable energy, and you realize that this too is not destruction but transformation, not a violent end but a gentle evening, a dusk that follows a long day, and you breathe deeply, allowing the metaphor to calm you, for it mirrors your own rhythms, the way days close, the way seasons turn, the way even lives fade into memory, all part of the same song. You pause and drift even farther into imagination, into the unimaginable spans of time when galaxies themselves are no longer visible, when the universe has stretched so far that every galaxy beyond your own is lost beyond the cosmic horizon. Its light to redshifted to reach you, and the sky has become dark, not because the stars are gone, but because their light can no longer cross the growing gulf of space. You let this vision settle gently, like a blanket of silence, and you realize that this too is part of the fate of galaxies, a fate not of erasure, but of privacy, as though each galaxy has retreated into its own solitude, carrying its stories within. You breathe again and think of how strange it is that the night sky you see now, filled with galaxies upon galaxies, is itself temporary, a privilege of this era, a window of cosmic time when expansion has not yet hidden everything from sight. And you feel gratitude, for you realize that to live now is to live in a golden age of vision, to see what future astronomers may never see, to witness a cosmos still open and bright. You drift still further into the farthest horizons of thought, when even stars are gone, when only remnants remain, black holes slowly evaporating through Hawking radiation, white dwarfs cooling into black dwarfs, neutron stars losing their heat, and the universe entering its dark era, a silence beyond silence. And though it seems bleak, you let the idea rest in you like a deep exhale, for it is simply the continuation of the breath, the final settling of rhythm, the quiet at the end of music. You recall that physicists debate this far future, some imagining heat death, others big rip, still others cyclical rebirth. But whatever the destiny, you take comfort in knowing that the universe itself accepts him, that even galaxies and stars must yield, that their fading is not failure but fulfillment, the completion of their song. You breathe one last time in this chapter, slowly and with gratitude, and you let the vision close with a gentle question rising like a star on the horizon. If the fate of galaxies is to drift apart and fade, then what does it mean for us, brief travelers within them? To live in this luminous moment, to see the sky while it is still full of stars. And that is where your journey flows next. Big rip as the way attachments may unravel, bonds stretching until they no longer hold, and you breathe slowly, carrying with you the quiet fate of stars and galaxies, the awareness that their light will one day fade, that their orbits will dissolve into solitude. And now your thoughts drift toward stranger horizons still, the speculative futures whispered by the scenarios drawn not from certainty but from possibility, ideas that stretch imagination as much as they stretch mathematics. And among these whispers one rises often, both haunting and fascinating: the Big Rip, a vision of the universe where dark energy is not constant but grows stronger with time. Its acceleration not steady but accelerating still further, pulling more urgently, tearing not only galaxies from one another but stars from galaxies, planets from stars, molecules from atoms, until everything is unbound, every structure undone. You pause here and let the idea settle, not as fear but as thought experiment. A meditation on impermanence written in cosmic scale, and though the image may sound violent, you allow it to soften into metaphor. For even here, in the notion of ripping apart, there is rhythm, a reminder that nothing holds forever, that change is the only permanence. You breathe again and imagine how this scenario unfolds. At first, galaxies drift away as they already do, expansion pushing them beyond the horizon of sight. But then, as phantom energy strengthens, the pull of clusters is broken. Galaxies unbind from their neighbors, then from themselves. Their stars flung outward into solitude, and the night sky grows emptier still. You drift further into time and see even stars surrendering, planetary systems torn apart as their orbits unravel, planets flung loose from suns, moons detached from planets, tides stretched until bonds no longer hold, and you realize that the same gentle acceleration you feel as calm in the present becomes, in this vision, urgency in the future, expansion running faster than gravity can ever answer. You pause and let the image move closer still. Molecules undone, atoms stretched, nuclei unbound. Even the most intimate structures of matter pulled apart, until all that remains is a thin, expanding sea of particles and energy, the universe reduced to whispers. Though the picture feels absolute, you breathe into it and let it become soft. For you remember that this is not destiny but one possibility, a whisper of what could be if dark energy is not constant but grows stronger with time. You breathe again, slower now, and consider other whispers of fate. Less dramatic, more patient. Heat death, the slow fading of all usable energy into equilibrium. The quiet settling of everything into sameness. A universe without difference, without contrast, without structure. Still expanding, but with no fuel to drive new stars. No gradients to power change, only silence. Only dusk that deepens forever. Though some call it bleak, you see it as evening, the natural close of a long day, the universe resting after eons of brilliance. And you find calm in the thought, for rest is not tragedy but completion. You let the thought drift onward to another whisper, the possibility of a big crunch, where expansion may one day halt, reverse, and collapse. Galaxies rushing inward, stars colliding, space-time folding back upon itself, until all is compressed into heat and density once more, perhaps leading to another birth, another universe, a cycle without beginning or end. You breathe softly and realize that in this scenario, destruction is rebirth, that collapse is prelude to creation, that even endings may circle into beginnings. You pause again and reflect that these whispers are not predictions but possibilities, drawn from equations that breathe many futures depending on how dark energy behaves. And since we do not yet know its true nature, the story remains open, an unfinished sentence stretching across the stars. You feel soothed by this openness, for it reminds you that uncertainty is not failure, but invitation. That the unknown future is space for wonder, that not knowing is itself a gift. You think of how scientists test these ideas, measuring with telescopes, tracing supernova, mapping baryon oscillations, charting redshift, hoping to see whether dark energy is constant or changing, whether it leans toward gentleness or urgency, whether the breath of the universe is steady or quickening. You breathe with them, sharing their patience, their willingness to wait for light that has traveled billions of years to arrive. And you realize that science itself is a meditation, a listening as slow and steady as the expansion it studies. You drift further into reflection and let the whispers become metaphors for your own life, the yet leaving space for new connections. Heat death as the settling of energy into rest, the quiet of evening that follows exertion, the big crunch as the folding inward of memory, the gathering of experience into silence that may one day bloom again. You find calm in this mirroring, for it tells you that cosmic fates are not alien to you but echo your own rhythms, your own impermanence, your own transformations. You breathe once more, slowly, and let your awareness soften. The whispers of future fates are not prophecies but stories, not certainties but possibilities, and in each one there is beauty. Each one a way of imagining the breath of the universe carried further. You let the chapter close gently, with one last thought rising like a faint star at the edge of night. If the future of the universe can be so many things, rest, return, then what truly matters is not which ending comes, but the wonder of living now within the luminous chapter still unfolding, beneath the sky still filled with galaxies, in the breath that still continues. And with that thought, you drift quietly onward, ready to listen to the instruments that humanity builds to hear the darkness more clearly. Big rip as the way attachments may unravel, bonds stretching until they no longer hold, and you breathe slowly, carrying with you the quiet fate of stars and galaxies, the awareness that their light will one day fade, that their orbits will dissolve into solitude. And now your thoughts drift towards stranger horizons still, the speculative futures whispered by the scenarios drawn not from certainty but from possibility, ideas that stretch imagination as much as they stretch mathematics. And among these whispers one rises often, both haunting and fascinating: the Big Rip, a vision of the universe where dark energy is not constant but grows stronger with time. Its acceleration not steady but accelerating still further, pulling more urgently, tearing not only galaxies from one another but stars from galaxies, planets from stars, molecules from atoms, until everything is unbound, every structure undone. You pause here and let the ideas settle, not as fear but as thought experiment, a meditation on impermanence written in cosmic scale. And though the image may sound violent, you allow it to soften into metaphor. For even here, in the notion of ripping apart, there is rhythm, a reminder that nothing holds forever, that change is the only permanence. You breathe again and imagine how this scenario unfolds. At first, galaxies drift away as they already do, expansion pushing them beyond the horizon of sight. But then, as phantom energy strengthens, the pull of clusters is broken. Galaxies unbind from their neighbors, then from themselves. Their stars flung outward into solitude, and the night sky grows emptier still. You drift further into time and see even stars surrendering, planetary systems torn apart as their orbits unravel, planets flung loose from suns, moons detached from planets, tides stretched until bonds no longer hold, and you realize that the same gentle acceleration you feel as calm in the present becomes, in this vision, urgency in the future, expansion running faster than gravity can ever answer. You pause and let the image move closer still, molecules undone, atoms stretched, nuclei unbound, even the most intimate structures of matter pulled apart, until all that remains is a thin, expanding sea of particles and energy, the universe reduced to whispers. Though the picture feels absolute, you breathe into it and let it become soft. For you remember that this is not destiny, but one possibility, a whisper of what could be if dark energy is not constant, but grows stronger with time. You breathe again, slower now, and consider other whispers of fate, less dramatic, more patient. Heat death, the slow fading of all usable energy into equilibrium, the quiet settling of everything into sameness. A universe without difference, without contrast, without structure, still expanding, but with no fuel to drive new stars, no gradients to power change, only silence, only dusk that deepens forever. Though some call it bleak, you see it as evening, the natural close of a long day, the universe resting after eons of brilliance. And you find calm in the thought, for rest is not tragedy but completion. You let the thought drift onward to another whisper, the possibility of a big crunch, where expansion may one day halt, reverse, and collapse. Galaxies rushing inward, stars colliding, space-time folding back upon itself, until all is compressed into heat and density once more, perhaps leading to another birth, another universe, a cycle without beginning or end. You breathe softly and realize that in this scenario, destruction is rebirth, that collapse is prelude to creation, that even endings may circle into beginnings. You pause again and reflect that these whispers are not predictions, but possibilities, drawn from equations that breathe many futures depending on how dark energy behaves. And since we do not yet know its true nature, the story remains open, an unfinished sentence stretching across the stars. You feel soothed by this openness, for it reminds you that uncertainty is not failure, but invitation, that the unknown future is space for wonder, that not knowing is itself a gift. You think of how scientists test these ideas, measuring with telescopes, tracing supernova, mapping baryon oscillations, charting red, hoping to see whether dark energy is constant or changing, whether it leans toward gentleness or urgency, whether the breath of the universe is steady or quickening. You breathe with them, sharing their patience, their willingness to wait for light that has traveled billions of years to arrive. And you realize that science itself is a meditation, a listening as slow and steady as the expansion it studies. You drift further into reflection and let the whispers become metaphors for your own life, the yet leaving space for new connections. Heat death as the settling of energy into rest, the quiet of evening that follows exertion, the big crunch as the folding inward of memory, the gathering of experience into silence that may one day bloom again. You find calm in this mirroring, for it tells you that cosmic fates are not alien to you, but echo your own rhythms, your own impermanence, your own transformations. You breathe once more, slowly, and let your awareness soften. The whispers of future fates are not prophecies, but stories, not certainties, but possibilities, and in each one there is beauty. Each one a way of imagining the breadth of the universe carried further. You let the chapter close gently, with one last thought rising like a faint star at the edge of night. If the future of the universe can be so many things, rest. Return then. What truly matters is not which ending comes, but the wonder of living now, within the luminous chapter still unfolding, beneath the sky still filled with galaxies, in the breath that still continues. And with that thought, you drift quietly onward, ready to listen to the instruments that humanity builds to hear the darkness more clearly. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the image of instruments listening to the dark. Telescopes and satellites like ears pressed gently against the silence of space. And now your thoughts shift toward what those instruments most often hear. The soft stretching of light itself, the quiet poetry of red, a language in which the universe writes its distances, its motions, its expansion. You begin to imagine a beam of light leaving a distant galaxy billions of years ago. Photons spilling outward in their pure rhythm, each wave crests following the next. And as space expands between them, the waves stretch, their crests pulled farther apart, their color sliding from blue toward red. A soft drift in hue that carries with it the memory of time and distance. You realize that every galaxy in the night sky is singing in this way. Its light shifted according to how far and how fast it recedes. And you find comfort in knowing that even silence is filled with song. That every point of light you see is also a story of motion written in color. You pause and reflect that astronomers measure this redshift, not as poetry but as data, comparing spectral lines, identifying how much longer each wavelength has become. And from this they infer the galaxy's distance, its speed, its place in the grand expansion. And yet you know that data and poetry are not separate, for the numbers are simply another way of listening to the universe's music. You breathe again and picture the spectrum itself. A rainbow stretched across black, with dark lines etched where atoms absorbed light. Fingerprints of elements written across the ages. And as the rainbow shifts toward red, you see those lines slide too. And suddenly, the cosmos becomes a moving script. A score where the notes slide gently across the staff. Each galaxy an instrument, each spectrum a verse. You pause and let this soothe you. For it means that the universe is never static, but always expressive. Always in motion, always speaking. And you realize that redshift is less a correction to be made than a poem to be read. A reminder that even as galaxies drift apart, they do not fall silent, but continue to sing. You think of Hubble, the astronomer who first charted this relation, measuring redshifts of galaxies and finding that the farther they are, the faster they recede. And from this came the vision of an expanding universe, a universe that breathes outward, and you marvel at how such a simple correlation became such a profound revelation. You drift deeper into this awareness, and picture the different kinds of cosmological, gravitational, Doppler, each with its own music, each a way that light stretches or bends. And you realize that light is not rigid but pliant, carrying within it the memory of every motion it has endured. You imagine cosmological redshift as the stretching of space itself, carrying galaxies apart and their light with them, and you see it as a soft widening of fabric, a loom where the threads lengthen with every breath. You imagine gravitational redshift, where light climbing out of a deep well of gravity loses some of its energy, stretching into red as it escapes, and you see it as a climb, a slow ascent. Photons struggling upward like climbers on a mountain, their color fading into red as they rise. You imagine Doppler redshift, the shift of relative motion, and see it as a familiar sound, like the lowering pitch of a train whistle as it departs, but transposed into light, into the symphony of galaxies. All of these together remind you that the universe is not static but alive, dynamic, filled with motions that light faithfully records. And this realization soothes you, for it tells you that nothing is lost, that every journey leaves its imprint, that even the faintest photon carries memory. You breathe again and let your thoughts wander to the farthest galaxies we have seen. Their light stretched so much that it is no longer visible to your eyes, shifted into infrared, into microwaves, into whispers of energy that only instruments can detect. And yet even here, even at the edges of observation, the poetry remains. The song of redshift continues, telling of distance, telling of time. You realize that when you look at the night sky, you are looking not into space alone, but into history, seeing galaxies not as they are, but as they were, their light stretched by journeys across billions of years. And you find peace in this, for it means that the past is never gone. That memory is woven into the light itself, that the universe remembers its own story and offers it freely to any who can listen. You drift now into reflection, letting redshift become metaphor, how your own life stretches, how moments drift into memory, how experiences shift in color as they recede in time. And though they change, though they fade, they are not lost. They remain written in the spectrum of your being. You pause and take comfort in this, for it means that you too are part of the poetry of redshift, your own memories stretched yet still present, your own journey recorded in the hues of your heart. You breathe once more, slower, and you let the chapter close with one last thought rising softly like a deepening hue. If redshift is the universe's way of writing distance and time into light, then what story does entropy tell? What silence does the far future hold, when even the galaxies themselves have slipped beyond view? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the poetry of redshift, the stretched light of galaxies drifting apart. And now your awareness turns toward an even subtler rhythm, one that does not blaze or shout, but creeps gently forward, the quiet law of entropy. The tendency for energy to spread, for order to soften into disorder, for heat to diffuse until no gradients remain. And though the word entropy may sound cold or technical, you begin to feel it here as a soft evening, the gradual settling of the cosmos into silence, not as destruction, but as rest. You picture the universe in its youth, energy blazing in gradients everywhere, stars burning hot, galaxies colliding, black holes devouring. And then you let the vision stretch across trillions of years, stars exhausting their fuel, galaxies no longer forming new suns, the night sky fading, and you realize that entropy is simply the natural flow of energy from difference to sameness, from heat to coolness, from brightness to dimness, a flow that cannot be stopped, only accepted. And you take comfort in its inevitability, for it mirrors the rhythms of your own life, the way days decline into nights, the way effort declines into rest, the way voices soften into silence. You pause here and imagine the deep future more vividly, stars turning into white dwarfs, glowing embers that fade over trillions of years into black dwarfs, cold and dark, neutron stars cooling, black holes swallowing what remains and then slowly evaporating through Hawking radiation, each release of energy thinning into the void, and eventually only faint particles and radiation left, spread so evenly that no work can be done, no change can occur, only silence stretching across an endless horizon. Though this vision may sound melancholic, you let it settle gently within you, for it is not a violent ending but a long exhale, a calm after a storm, the closing of a book after an eternal story. And in this closing there is a kind of peace, the peace of completion. You breathe again, slower now, and think of the phrase heat death, the idea that the universe will one day reach thermal equilibrium, uniform in temperature, without gradients to drive motion. And though death is in the name, you do not hear it as doom, but as stillness, as the quiet of a lake at dawn, perfectly smooth. Undisturbed, you drift further into this awareness and consider how entropy already shapes what you see. Stars shine because they disperse energy. Life exists because it channels gradients into order. And every heartbeat is an act of entropy balanced against structure. Every breath a brief defiance of equilibrium that eventually yields. You realize that entropy is not the enemy of life, but its condition, the backdrop against which order emerges temporarily, like a candle flame rising against the dark. Beautiful precisely because it cannot last forever. You take comfort in this, for it means that impermanence is not flaw but essence, that life shines because it is finite, that meaning is woven into the fragile balance of order in a universe tending toward disorder. You pause again and imagine entropy as a storyteller, whispering that everything changes, that nothing remains as it was, that all structures dissolve into simpler forms. And though its story may seem sorrowful, you recognize its gentleness, for entropy is patient, unfolding not in seconds but in eons, not in centuries but in trillions of years. A pace so slow that it feels almost eternal, and you let this patience soothe you, for it reminds you that endings need not be rushed, that dissolution is not sudden but gradual, tender. You breathe once more and let entropy become metaphor, the way memories blur with time, the way sharp edges of sorrow soften, the way joy fades into warmth, the way all experiences spread gently into the larger fabric of your being, none erased, only transformed, none lost, only diffused. You drift deeper into reflection and see entropy not only as decline, but as balance. The universe's way of ensuring that energy is shared, that no corner is hoarded, that all gradients are eventually leveled. And in this leveling you find a quiet justice, a fairness that carries even into the far future. You pause and smile softly, for you realize that silence itself is not absence, but presence, that the far future's quiet will not be nothingness, but fullness spread evenly everywhere, a completeness that no longer changes. You breathe again, slower, and let the chapter draw toward its rest. One final thought rising like a faint star in the fading sky. If entropy ensures the silence of the far future, then what stories do black holes hold as they wait within that silence? What secrets do they guard about the past that may yet whisper into eternity? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the silence of entropy, the vision of a universe fading into equilibrium. And now you turn your awareness toward the darkest and most enigmatic of cosmic structures, black holes, those regions of space where gravity bends so strongly that nothing, not even light, can escape. And you begin to wonder what role they play in the story of memory, whether they erase the past or hold it within, whether they are destroyers or keepers. You picture one first as a sphere of darkness against the stars, not a hole in space, but a presence of extreme density, the remnant of a massive star collapsed beyond return, and you feel its gravity as a kind of silence, pulling all motion inward, a silence that hides what has fallen, concealing the details behind a veil known as the event horizon. You pause here and let the image soften. and you reflect that to stand before a black hole is to face a paradox. Information carried in by matter and light seems to vanish, and yet the laws of physics insist that information cannot be destroyed, that every story written in particles and fields must remain somewhere. Somehow, in the fabric of the universe, you breathe again, softer now, and recall how this puzzle has haunted physicists for decades. How Stephen Hawking showed that black holes are not perfectly black, but radiate faintly, slowly evaporating through what is called Hawking radiation, a quantum process at the edge of the event horizon. If black holes radiate, then eventually they may evaporate entirely, vanishing into nothing but a thin mist of particles. But what becomes of the information that fell within? Is it lost forever, erased from the cosmic record, or is it somehow encoded in the radiation, hidden in patterns too subtle to yet understand? You pause and feel the weight of the question, and though it may sound abstract, you recognize its intimacy. For it is a question about memory, about whether the universe forgets, or whether it remembers in ways we cannot yet read. You drift further into this reflection and imagine that information is never destroyed but scrambled, written upon the surface of the horizon like letters in shifting waves. A hologram of all that has fallen in, and you realize that black holes may not be tombs but archives, keepers of memory encoded in lightless ways. You breathe once more, slowly, and you see in your imagination the holographic principle. The idea that the three-dimensional contents of a region can be stored upon its two-dimensional boundary. That what falls into a black hole is not erased but recorded upon the horizon. And you let this image soothe you, for it suggests that nothing is ever truly lost. That even the most extreme silence still remembers. You pause and reflect on the metaphor. Your own life, too, may seem to lose moments, to see them vanish into forgetfulness. Yet perhaps they are stored at the edges of your being, encoded in ways not always visible, but never gone, always present in hidden form. This comforts you, for it tells you that memory is not destroyed, but transformed. Preserved in whispers, at the boundary of perception, you drift deeper into the vision, and imagine black holes as librarians of the cosmos, holding within their dark shelves the records of stars, gas, planets, even light that once fell toward them. And though you cannot open these shelves, you trust that the memory is there, waiting, preserved. You let the metaphor expand. Entropy may spread energy thin. Galaxies may drift apart, stars may fade. But black holes stand as guardians, keepers of the details, waiting until the last. Their silence not empty but full. You breathe gently and consider the far future, when only black holes remain, scattered across the darkened cosmos. And in that era they are the last great structures, the last keepers of order before even they evaporate. And you imagine them releasing their memories back into the universe, their Hawking radiation carrying subtle scattering the information once trapped, dispersing it into the cosmic sea. You pause here and feel the tenderness of this idea that nothing is wasted, nothing erased, only delayed, only transformed. And in the end, everything returns to the larger whole. You breathe again and reflect that this paradox of information is not only physics, but philosophy. For it asks whether reality itself forgets, or whether every action, every word, every thought remains written into the fabric of existence. You take comfort in the possibility that memory is fundamental, that forgetting is only the surface, that the deeper truth is remembrance. You see now that black holes, once feared as erasers, may instead be the ultimate archivists, ensuring that nothing is truly lost, and this soothes you, for it suggests that your own story, too, is kept in ways beyond your sight. Preserved in the universe's holographic script, you let the chapter draw toward its rest. One last thought rising softly like a glimmer at the edge of darkness. If black holes are keepers of memory, then what do they reveal about the universe itself? What do they whisper about the balance between forgetting and remembering? And how might their silence lead us to a deeper understanding of what it means to endure? And that is where your journey flows next. You breathe slowly, carrying with you the whispers of black holes as keepers of memory. And now your awareness drifts toward the farthest edge of imagination. The last horizon, a place where knowledge thins into mystery, where science meets philosophy, and where the story of the universe is no longer just about matter and energy, but about meaning. You imagine yourself standing at the edge of time, looking out across an endless expanse where galaxies have drifted away, stars have burned out, black holes have evaporated, and entropy has spread everything into thin silence. And yet, even here, even in this imagined dusk, there is still a horizon, not of light, but of thought, not of stars, but of wonder. And you begin to realize that the last horizon is not a line you reach, but a question you carry. You breathe again, slower, and reflect on how every horizon you have met in this journey, the event horizon of black holes, the cosmic horizon of expanding space, the thermal horizon of entropy, has not been a wall but a threshold, not an ending but an invitation to see more deeply, to ask more quietly, to listen more closely. And you let this realization calm you, for it means that the last horizon, too, is not closure but openness, not silence but possibility. You drift through memory now, recalling the path that brought you here, the expansion of the universe like a breath outward, the rhythm of galaxies woven into a cosmic web, the yielding of gravity to dark energy, the whispers of fields unknown, the poetry of redshift, the silence of entropy, the paradox of black holes, each chapter a step, each idea a lantern lighting your way. And you realize that all of them lead not to answers but to wonder, and wonder itself is the destination. You breathe softly and think of how the universe, vast beyond measure, can still be intimate, how its laws can be felt in your breath, how its rhythms can be mirrored in your heartbeat, how its horizons can be carried in your mind. And this intimacy soothes you, for it tells you that you are not separate from the cosmos, but within it, part of it, a note in its endless song. You pause and reflect that the last horizon is not far away, but here, present in every question you cannot answer, in every silence you cannot fill, in every mystery that remains even after equations and measurements. And you find peace in this, for it means that wonder is never exhausted, that curiosity never ends, that the universe is not something to be solved, but something to be lived with, dreamed with, listened to. You breathe again and imagine the last horizon as a vast ocean at twilight, stretching endlessly, its surface calm, its depths unknown. And you sit at its shore, watching waves that have traveled across eternity. And you do not need to cross it. You only need to listen, to rest in its presence, to let its rhythm carry you. You drift now into metaphor, seeing the last horizon as the boundary of sleep itself, the edge where waking thought dissolves into dreams, where questions blur into images, where knowledge softens into feeling. And you realize that this too is part of the journey, that every night you approach your own horizon, letting go of control, surrendering to mystery, trusting the dark to hold you. You take comfort in this, for it mirrors the universe's own rhythm, its own surrender to expansion, to entropy, to silence. And you understand that the cosmos too rests, that even stars sleep, that even galaxies yield, that even light stretches into slumber. You breathe once more, deeply, and you let the chapter close not with certainty, but with openness. One final thought rising like a faint star beyond the horizon. If the universe itself carries mysteries it never erases, then perhaps the last horizon is not an end, but an eternal invitation, a quiet reminder that to live is to wonder, and to wonder is to belong forever to the cosmos.